And I think that if we can create what I call it the organizational brain. If we can create an organizational brain, then there is necessarily increased resilience, increased agility, and a sense that the organization is the powerful one. And if the organization is the powerful one, then you as an individual will want to stay because I'm drawing on all this knowledge, insight, and energy. Whereas if it's all
Yeah.
about me,
Yeah.
my genius, I've got
Yep.
no incentive to stay because it's all about me. So I think that there's a natural and inevitable shift away from individuals towards teams, towards the organizational knowledge, and towards sharing and building together, not on your own and having your own personal agenda.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Learning and Development Podcast, sponsored by Infopro Learning. As always, I'm your host, Nolan Hout. Joining me today, we have a very special guest, Dr. Nigel Paine. Nigel Paine is a change-focused leader with a worldwide reputation and unique grasp of media, learning and development in the public, private, and academic sectors. It's kind of rare that you get those three perspectives, so that's pretty unique, and happy to have Nigel with us today. He's got over 20 years of experience with a really interesting career, from leading learning at the BBC, launching a very large award-winning program across 6,000 different people there, to writing thought-provoking books, 3 of them, and maybe a 4th one on the way, if I understand that. Four written for.
Yeah,
okay, the 5th one's on the way. Speaking at conferences around the world, and if you would believe it, he has some type of spare time to present a monthly TV program called Learning Now, along with co-hosting a podcast called From Scratch. Believe it or not, I could probably keep going, but we only have a short amount of time for this episode, so we're not going to list even more of his accolades, but let's get to it and meet our guest, Dr. Nigel Paine. Nigel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much, Nolan. It's a real pleasure to be here, and a real pleasure to meet you, not literally face-to-face, but kind of virtually face-to-face.
Yeah, I'm sure our paths will cross. What I have found is that it seems like the second that I have somebody on my podcast, I run into them within a month. There's just some weird coincidence where once they're here, the universe is the stars align. So I'm sure that time will come soon enough, although I don't make it across the pond as much, but well. So
thank you.
So before we get started and into the topic today, which we're really going to be talking about, the power of sharing insight and knowledge and how to build organizational resilience within organizational learning, we always like to start with a little bit of an origin story, if you would, Nigel. Talk to us a little bit about how your career got started in this space and kind of the important notes along the way.
It got started a long time ago, but it got started with the IT revolution, when personal computing was starting to get big.
Yeah.
I had this notion in my head, based on nothing really apart from intuition, that this could be an amazing environment for learning. When it wasn't, it was for typing letters. And I got involved very early in that ed tech space, and I ran a software company. We developed educational software, learning software, a long time ago. And then I got out of that, and I got more into corporate area, where I was helping organizations to pretty much transform the way they saw learning and to maximize opportunities for everybody. But in doing that, I also got involved in the public space and helping not just people working in organizations, but everybody access learning and development, access qualifications. So it was at the very beginning of saying, hey, you missed out at school, but you can still do this. And here are the pathways to doing it. So kind of fleshing out those pathways. And I got involved in one of the very early online MBAs, so that we were inventing it as we went. It was it was good fun. It was fascinating. And the jockeying and the fighting with the academics was also really interesting. It was an awful lot of resistance, which I had to overcome to get, but we got launched, and it was very successful. So yeah, all of that was my origin story in a way, just thinking about opportunity, thinking about doing things differently, and thinking about going big. I'm really interested in scalability. And up until the point that we got to with that, using technology, it was all very small, really. It was all a handful of people here, a handful of people there. And I got really interested in the idea, what if it was 1,000 people? What if it was 10,000 people? And working out the ramifications of that. So, and that's kept me going, really. We're still on that journey in many ways. And it's gone very, very developmental. I started off with CD-ROMs and the power of CD-ROM, and then when we got onto the internet, we went backwards because you couldn't get the same video effects and visual effects as you could. Then we got that going, and now we're into a world of AI, and I have to rethink everything in the light of all that. So my story is discovery, implementation. Oh my goodness, start all over again. Discovery, implementation. Oh my goodness, start again. Discovery, implementation. That's not a bad trajectory. I loved it.
I don't think so at all. And I think it's interesting. And I love your take on it before we kind of get into the meat of the subject. But I was just doing a webinar yesterday on how to leverage AI to develop courses, and I started with, what is kind of an adjective you would use to describe how you're viewing AI today? And as you would expect, it's a very mixed bag, right? It's scared, it's excited, it's all these things. And then one person wrote ever evolving. And I said, I think that probably, I don't even know if that's an adjective, but I was like, that really seems to describe, the kind of the world that anybody that is deep enough into AI would know that they don't know enough, right? Right? Like, there's this.
And by the time you do know enough, it's changed. So it's like trying to pin jelly on a wall. You can get a little bit on, but it falls off very quickly afterwards. So yes, ever evolving is also ever reconceptualizing, ever reframing your perspective, all of that stuff, as well as new products, new ideas.
Yeah,
so many companies have got niche AI. There are as many AI ideas out there as there are learning management systems, for example. They just exploded. There are hundreds of brilliant little AI companies, and it's finding the right ones that meet the need that you've got. So it's very exciting, but ever evolving. I'll go with that. I'll back that.
And I was just talking with my wife actually about some of she's like, well, what about Michael Berry and his prediction of we're in an AI bubble, right? So he's the guy, if you haven't, he predicted the housing crisis, and he bet against it, right? He shorted the housing market and made, billions of dollars. And he's come out and said, I'm shorting the AI market. And so that represented a really interesting take for a lot of people. Then he very shortly after that actually announced like the closure of his company. So who knows, like, but I was talking with my wife about the implications of it. And I was like, really, I don't think it's a sign that AI is necessarily going away. I think it's exactly what you talked about, Nigel, where AI exists in all these pockets, right? There's all these kind of bolt-on AI solutions, like these and we're one, right? So we built a bolt on top of any LLM that you have. We have predefined prompts. Doesn't matter what job you have, whether you want to create a storyboard, video script, e-learning, training needs assessment, whatever it is. So you don't actually have to know AI. You just have to log into the software, and it's going to leverage AI for you.
Stick in the prompt.
That's just a bolt-on. But that only is going to last for a short amount of time, right? Eventually, Copilot's going to have that, and it's going to be adopted within an organization. And so I think what's really going to happen, I mean, my predictions is worth pretty much nothing. But what I think is, really when we talk about, I think it's going to go away from so many of these bolt-ons, because they are saying that, every month there's an insane number of AI startups that we're having hyper growth that fail because Microsoft or Claude or Copilot, or a ChatGPT just adds a feature into their product that does that what their whole company was designed around.
Exactly.
So really, really interesting. So, but it's funny when we were talking and putting this together, I was like, I don't know how much AI is going to play into this conversation, but somehow it ekes its way into every conversation.
It's in every conversation. It's
impossible to get away
from. We can talk about anything. We'll end up talking about AI.
Yeah. But what we really want to talk about is, again, organizational learning, the power of sharing insight and
Yeah.
knowledge, and how to build organizational resilience. So with that, I'll kind of hand it over to you, Nigel, starting with kind of the power of sharing insight and knowledge, which I think that's the goal probably of this podcast and probably a lot of what you do
Yeah.
with your learning TV show. But explain to me a little bit about this.
Well, the last book I wrote, which was Building Organizational Learning, is predicated on this view that organizations have gone hell for leather, focusing on individuals, individual talent, individual
Yeah.
performance reviews,
Yeah.
individual KPIs, individual. And the problem with that is it excludes the community, it excludes the team. And I think it's very dangerous, particularly in an era where things are changing so fast. If you only focus on individuals, how quickly does the insight and knowledge
Mm,
of the individual move around the organization? There's no focus, there's no structure, there's no process. The answer is
hmm
sometimes not at all. They're alone slowly. And when that individual leaves because they're talent, they're exciting, and they go somewhere else that will give them more or give them bigger opportunities, then the organization has nothing but a gaping void left. And my perception was that if we could find some way of joining the organizational knowledge together, then that would never happen, because the individual goes, the knowledge remains, and the knowledge is embedded in the organization. It's not
Yeah.
embedded in the individual. So that was the idea. And I think that if we can create what I call it the organizational brain. If we can create an organizational brain, then there is necessarily increased resilience, increased agility, and a sense that the organization is the powerful one. And if the organization is the powerful one, then you as an individual will want to stay, because I'm drawing on all this knowledge, insight, and energy. Whereas if it's all
Yeah.
about me,
Yeah.
my genius, I've got
Yep.
no incentive to stay, because it's all about me. So I think that there's a natural and inevitable shift away from individuals towards teams, towards the organizational knowledge, and towards sharing and building together, not on your own and having your own personal agenda. It has lots of ramifications, but I think it's going to happen. And I think it's the only way organizations can respond to this kind of crazy times that we're in, and the amount of massive shifts that we're all having to deal with on a day by day almost basis.
Can you kind of compare and contrast that thought with what organizations are trying to do when they implement OKRs? Are you familiar with OKRs?
Yeah, yeah. The difference is that I think the knowledge is embedded in people, and people have to be willing and ready to engage and share. It's not about
Hmm.
processes and systems and boxes, if you like, where you put knowledge. And the
Yeah.
problem is that if the people are unwilling, then the OKR really doesn't work, or doesn't work as well as it should work. And my feeling is that you need to focus on building the right kind of culture where people have the right kind of attitude, the right kind of emotional engagement, the right kind of respect for their fellow workers. And at that point, you create a climate where you can begin to build those repositories, which are really important. But it won't work on its own. It's like a big IT issue is only a big IT solution is only as good as the people who have to implement
Yeah.
it. And the same with knowledge. It's only the sharing is only as good as the people who are willing to put in and willing to take out. And so there's a cultural problem and a people problem at the heart of all of it. And the same with AI. I think there's a people problem and a cultural problem at the heart of AI.
Yeah, as you were describing it, I was thinking, well, this idea of kind of creating a hive mind and everything, we understand what our company is doing and we understand why our company exists, and this is our unique value proposition. I feel like a lot of the pushback that I see adopting anything, but in this case AI, since it's the most current, is they're like, well, we're not being told to what ends we're doing the means. Like we
Yeah.
we don't understand, if we do that, does this change who we are as a company? Does this change who we are as a department? How do you want us to be steering this ship so that we're not all kind of pointed at different ends of the compass and
Yes.
actually ripping the company apart?
Yes.
Um, uh,
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. So
It,
and I can see that challenge of the CEO and C-suite and everybody kind of trying to say, well, gosh, I'm in the Bermuda Triangle. My compass is spinning because I
yeah.
don't know where this whole thing's going to land.
Exactly. And the only way you can't have a CEO sitting in her wise, wisdom-filled office and work it all out herself. It's just
Yeah.
impossible. You've got to bring the whole organization and agree that position and agree that stance so everybody is clear. And one of the problems that I perceive in organizations is that and particularly AI brings this out, this sense of fear. I don't want to make a decision in case I get it wrong. I don't want to do something
Yeah.
that might make me look
Yeah.
foolish. I don't want to do something that might invalidate my role. So therefore, I'll do nothing. I'll sit back and wait for someone to tell me. And in this day and age, sitting back and waiting for someone to tell me is a disastrous stance for an individual, for a team, but it's a disastrous perspective for an organization. That is the way to the end. You know, that's the plank leading to a deep dark hole, I think. So we've got to
I
engage
just,
people.
yeah. Yeah. And I
Yep.
just wrote on this. I kind of, I had this, I understand that, and so if we get to kind of how do we create this hive mind, right? I think a lot of it is you have to create a space where people are safe to
Yes.
get the bad ideas out and get the good ideas out. And I think
Yes.
where we're seeing some problem right now is we do have those people who are kind of stubbornly crossing their arms and saying no, right? And I'm like, listen, it's not a great analogy, but imagine if everybody around you is using email, but you've decided to still handwrite your notes and deliver them via post. It's going to take 4 or 5 days, 4 or 5 days to get it out, and you're going to say, well, it's more personal, since it took me longer, it's more meaningful. But what you end up doing is you're the only one left doing that, and you're not really helping. Well, you may be right or you may be wrong. The reality is in your next job they're going to ask, do you know how to use email? And you need to know. And same with your employees. If you're a leader and that's kind of your stance, you're not equipping your people to leverage that. So how do you so if we understand where we what we want, how do organizations start to get there? I mean, it just seems like such a Herculean
It is.
lift.
It's not easy. Let's just go back to your email. I'm old enough to remember the days when senior executives in organizations would get their PA to print out their emails. They
Yeah,
would
yeah,
annotate their emails and so with a pencil, and then the executive assistant would then retype the reply
yeah.
and so on. And what happened was that the rest of the organization thought that was ridiculous, but the rest of the organization thought, well, if this is the way this place is run, I'm out of here. So
Mm,
what it did was, in tolerating that, you end
yeah.
up fracturing the organization. And I think it's the same with AI. I think we've got to be, we've got to wear big boys' trousers. That
Hmm.
if you are embedding AI into workflows, you can't say, but it's okay if you don't want to use it. It's okay if
Hmm.
you want to do it 3 times longer and make 25 times more mistakes. That's not allowed. You've got to say, in a psychologically safe environment where you can fail, we will help you, we will support you,
Yeah.
but there is no alternative. This is the future. And if you do that, organizations will get there much, much quicker than being tolerant of, oh, well, he's very senior and he doesn't like using the keyboard. That's not an excuse, that's failure. And I think that we shouldn't tolerate that. So if that sounds like a harsh, horrible line, maybe it is. But I really think that if an organization is going for AI, go for it. And there are no
Hmm.
exceptions. Get there, create a space where people can practice and get better, but don't accept a refusal to engage.
But
If you
it,
don't want to do it,
yeah,
go somewhere else where perhaps they don't do it. I don't know whether you'll
yeah. I mean,
find it anywhere, but go
it's
somewhere else.
interesting, right? About, well, what is it? It must have been 7 months ago, 6 months ago, maybe. The CEO of Shopify runs one of the world's largest e-commerce platforms.
He
He
certainly is.
said,
Yes.
you have to send me an email of what you are, how you are using AI, or you can't work here.
Yeah.
It's something along those lines, right? And so
Yeah.
it's interesting because while at the time a lot of people criticized, and I think as we reflect back, he had made it. He had said, "Listen, we are an AI organization. If you don't want to use it, then just don't be here."
Yeah, it's true.
And I think the more we're getting into this, if we talk about sharing insight and knowledge, the first thing is like, okay, what is our take? And people are looking for just the direction. I don't think a lot of people necessarily have a huge care of is it
Yeah.
east, north, south, west, but just
Just
tell
tell
me
me.
what that direction
Yeah,
is,
tell me what
because
they're doing.
if I don't
Couldn't agree
know
with you
that
more.
direction,
Yeah.
I don't feel like that there's no safety there. But I think, but how do you, so at an org level though, how do you how do you do that? What's a meaningful way to do that when maybe the needle is moving so quickly?
So fast. Well, if I'd have been advising that CEO of Shopify, I would not have said, you tell me individually how you're using AI. I would have
Mm,
said, tell me as a team how the team is using AI,
yeah,
what
yeah,
benefits that is delivering, and how that is going to profit my company, and what profit
hmm,
Shopify. And therefore you take the sting out of it, focus, needly down on the individual. And I think those team discussions, that team process would have really helped create greater productivity and more efficiency and effectiveness for Shopify. So the answer to your question is, don't pin it on the individuals. Don't say, right, on
yeah,
Friday, we're now an AI company. You give me a 26-point plan on how you use AI and the benefit. And if you don't do that, you're out. I
yeah,
think you say, let's have a conversation. Let's just look at the use cases. Let's pick that group over there who are early adopters, and let's share the benefits that they have proved for us right across the organization. And let's
yeah,
just pick up the best and the best practice. Let's identify some of the common problems and put them in a pool where we can all work out what to do and how to get around them. But let's move forward as a company. And that, to me, that naturally will push out those who are not willing to participate in that. They just go anyway.
hmm,
But if you do it as a corporate group, then there's no real pressure. You just, it's a kind of exploration, and it's a safe exploration. So that's
yeah,
where I would go.
I-
I wouldn't focus it on an individual fail or succeed. I'd focus on, what do we need to do in this organization to enable the team to use this successfully? And it may be systems and processes that are the problem. It may not be the individuals. It's just that they're having to work with absolutely awful systems that are outdated and they can't fit it all in. So surface all of that and work out the problems. You need to create a totally different organization if you're going to embed AI. So this is a journey, guys. How are we going to do that? What do we need to change first? And what do we need to change then? So as a CEO, you should be not telling them what to do, but in some ways learning from your people. Tell me what I need to do in this organization to maximize the opportunities that you have all spotted and that we're maybe not using enough of or exploiting enough. So it's a more iterative, a more inclusory policy than
mm.
get down there and use AI.
And
If you haven't got it done by Friday, Nolan, you're in big trouble. And you're terrified at that point. And I think
yeah,
fear is not a great way to innovate.
yeah,
I've
and
never known an organization innovate through fear. It doesn't happen. It really doesn't
y-
happen.
yeah, and I think if we look at again, like a lot of what I'm hearing you talk about is kind of this idea of the more you make it about an individual, the more likely it is to fail.
Yeah,
Which comes to like this resilience, which is the next part. Like how all of this is building resilience is because an individual might fail, but as an organization, if you have a strong foundation of what you're trying to do, it's very hard for the org to fail. And I think about that. Like I think about it from this like org perspective. I think you're right that when you get that letter from the CEO, you actually end up becoming very individualistic about the whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah.
And what you end up doing is losing the sight of why am I even doing this AI
Exactly.
thing? I'm going through this with my team right now as we're starting to do annual planning. I did want to I put something in there about at first I wrote out, I said, tell me how you're using AI. And I was like, maybe that's not the right way to say it. It's more like how is AI changing what you do today? And more
Yeah,
importantly, how is AI changing the lives of the people that buy the things that InfoPro Learning does? Because if you don't and how is AI changing InfoPro Learning itself? Before you can get into the individual, we need to
exactly.
like first understand. And I realized, like, as I was typing, erasing, typing, erasing, typing, erasing, and I've started to have some of these conversations with my team. I've realized that's where the biggest light bulbs and the biggest impacts are actually being made, are the people that are really not just saying, it used to take me 2 days to write a storyboard, and now it takes me 4 hours. That's not insight. That's just a leveraging of a technology, right? That's, oh, I
Exactly.
now know how to write an email versus write a letter. That
Yeah,
is a very, very individual KPI.
yeah,
But if they're saying, I'm able to reduce a reliance on a subject matter expert, or I'm reducing the reliance on a graphic designer because I'm able to take the storyboard and use a tool like Easy Generator or Camtasia, whatever it is, Storyline, to actually get the work done faster and without. And what that means is that the program doesn't lose any of its punch because I'm not having to take what was in my mind and now send. So like you're really getting deeper. So I think I'm agreeing. I think I really believe what you're saying is it perfect that the more you make it at an org level, the more resilient it is.
it's guaranteed. I am absolutely convinced, and I've worked with loads of organizations and thousands of people, and the idea that you pin it on an individual, it breaks resilience because you're under threat, or you're going, oh, I don't care about Nolan there, he's struggling, but I'm all right. The minute you start to focus on teams, an organization, and on systems, getting the systems right, people relax, they work together, they solve problems together, and you build that resilience. Because resilience in the organization is not just about individuals, it's about how the
Hmm.
organization responds to crisis. In other words, responds to individuals
Yeah.
who let the organization down or aren't able to complete something. The organization comes together. That's resilience. And you don't do that by putting the finger on each individual and saying, you're good, you're bad, you're in the middle somewhere. It's all about how the organization can optimize the opportunities that are available to it. And wow, there are so many opportunities at the moment. You only have to sit down for 5 minutes, with your team. If you start the conversation about how do you think AI could really help us, they'll come back to you. If you put your finger on your team and say, how are you using it? And I hope it's a lot because otherwise I'll be
Hmm.
really angry with you. That doesn't encourage that kind of brainstorming and
Hmm.
ideation and all the ways in which AI actually makes a massive, massive difference. And in your organization, there will be hidden areas where AI could be transformative. But if you don't work together to pull those out, they will stay hidden. And that's not catastrophic necessarily, but it's not a good idea to hide opportunities by focusing too much on individual capability. And if you can ask for help, like if I'm stuck and I say, Nolan, can you help me? And you say, yeah, of course I'll help you. I'm a bit ahead of you. I'll sort that out. There's so much more likely to deliver than if you say, I'm sorry, I'm too busy. Go and sort it out yourself. And then whisper, he's no good. He doesn't know how to do that. So it's just building the corporate responsibility and a feeling at the end of the day that we did this together, not I did it and it's my reward. And
Hmm.
that's the organizations that are coming out best with this are the ones that are working together and they focus on the organizational needs, the product, the customer, and not on me and my ability or capability, because that can change, very, very quickly. Things, new product, new opportunity, new customer. So you need the right mental attitude and the right perspective, as well as the right skills. Those things all come together. It's about culture, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And so how do you, and you've led, large learning teams, BBC
Yeah.
we talked about earlier. How do you help steer that ship? If you're sitting in that department today, what does that look like? when somebody comes to you and says, "Hey, I need to create this program, or I need to do this, or I need to do that," or maybe you're in charge of kind of developing the leadership programs for next year.
Yeah.
What are some of those insights, like maybe some specific things that you would say, this is how I would push back on this, or these are the types of conversations I would be having with my business leaders?
Yeah, I think we're in such times. I would say, for example, I was actually talking to someone today about leadership programs, and they're saying I'm in charge of revising the leadership
Mm,
programs. What do I do? And I said, well, what you don't do is start with what you've got and say, how can we incrementally tweak this? I say, let's imagine there are no leadership programs. Who are the people that we're trying to serve? What are the
yeah.
outcomes that we're trying to deliver? And what do the new opportunities allow us to do that we couldn't do last week or last month or last year? So you start from a tabula rasa in a way. And that's where the
Mm,
ideas start to flood in, where people say, well, we could build experiences. We don't need products here. We could create a problem solving network of leaders, and that could be, and whatever, that. But it's getting people to break out of the mold, because the mold is the thing you've been doing already isn't necessarily the optimal. By saying it's the thing we're doing already plus a bit of AI, it may be that AI completely breaks the thing we're doing already, and you need to reconceptualize. So I really find people respond well to that. There's no blame attached to that. It's not success or failure. It's not about you. It's just
mm.
let's imagine we've been invited to do this for the first time ever. How would we do it? What do you think? And the ideas start pouring in, and you say, well, which of these could we leverage using AI? What else could we do? Perhaps using AI bit more imaginatively. Again, the ideas keep flooding in, and you end up with something. I just feel you end up with something at the end that is completely different to where you started, and is actually transformational. Because AI, if it's nothing else, it's transformational. And trying to put it in a box and say, well, it can modify this little thing here, that would be all right, because that's boring admin. I don't want to do that. Is missing the point entirely about what's actually going on, I think. You've got to think big.
Yeah, that I liked that. In your when you were talking a little bit about how you started, I was thinking about kind of this idea of built to scale, and right,
Yeah,
obviously with your back
yeah,
in tech, that's kind of how you design everything as well. If it
yeah.
works for 5, how would it work for 50? How would it work for 500? How would it work for 5,000,
Mm,
50,000, whatever it is? I think that's a really good concept as it applies to AI. The one thing that I always say is a little bit it can be kind of tough, or almost handcuff. I'm seeing some people is, yes, I agree that if I just use AI to, I don't know, build a better e-learning, that's only sustainable for a very short amount of time because it's
exactly.
actually going to leapfrog. But what I'm seeing people do is say, I'm too afraid to even do that. Like
Right.
because I don't know what that next thing is, I'm not,
Mm,
I almost can't give the direction to my team of, just build a better mousetrap because I know that very soon we're not going to even need a mousetrap. I feel
that's
like
exactly
sometimes
right.
people get handcuffed with that. And so what they
Mm,
end up doing is doing nothing.
yeah,
And
yeah,
so a big thing that I try to push people on is you need to think big, you need to think with scale, but you also need to be realistic that predicting what that next thing is very hard. It's what is it? Aim for the stars, and if you land on the moon, whatever that is, right? Like
yeah,
if you know that it's going to change, great. Set that direction with your team. Be upfront that I don't exactly know where this is going to play out. Nobody does. That's where we're aiming. Now, step 1 is this, step 2 is this, step 3 is this. Now, step 3 might change, but let us not lose sight of the 1 and 2 that can give us gains in
yeah.
2026 and maybe 2027.
Absolutely right. I use the word experiment. Give people permission to experiment. Give people
Hmm.
permission to try things which just don't work. Just fail and say, "Hey, we learned a lot from that
Yeah.
failure. That's not where we're going." But it means that you discover where you might be going, and that gives people confidence, and therefore they can augment the present by building and aiming at the future. But if you only augment the present and you don't think about where it might go, then you're in trouble. Because the incremental leaps are so small that it's not going to help. really. I think
Hmm.
you've got to think big, but be practical. You've got
Yeah.
to live for tomorrow, but think about what you can do for today. And if
Yeah.
people live in that double mindset, it can be very, very helpful and very, very productive. Because if you get people freely to think, then when you come back to, well, what are we going to do tomorrow? That in some ways it's kind of lubricated the ideas, and
Yeah.
more
Yeah.
ideas occur that wouldn't have come out for the present. And plus, you've got a pathway through to the future, because that's the two dimensions that you've been living in. So it's really important to get people thinking, get people feeling, get people dreaming and imagining, and not get people being scared. I
Yeah.
don't know where this is going, or get people just focusing. Well, I'll do this. This is so minute and so easy to manage. I'll just go there because it doesn't threaten
Yeah.
me. It's easy, because easy is not probably the best solution now. I think we've got to go a step beyond
That's a little
the
step beyond.
obvious easy thing and try
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah.
And
Agreed.
it will deliver. It will deliver amazingly.
Yeah. Well, with that, I think that's a great way to kind of end of. I think we've talked at a very high level for those out there. Really try to bring things back to the middle. Focus a
Yeah.
little bit more at an org standpoint and
Yes.
building that central foundation. If you've ever needed resilience, it is today.
Yeah.
Things are changing the world. I mean, if you even took AI out of the picture, it is it was dynamic before AI, right? Look back to
Yeah.
2019. Nobody would say, or sorry, 2023 when AI kind of really took off with ChatGPT-1. It's not like we were living in a certain time period. So
Yeah.
we've got a lot of uncertainty coming at it from all different
Yeah.
angles. The best
Yes.
thing you can
Exactly.
do is to stop, say, what are we doing at an org level? Because that investment is a long investment. It's a costly investment. It's a hard investment. But if you do it, it means that every time something changes, you don't have to go back to start and say, oh, now we got to adopt this. It's inherent in your culture. It's inherent how you're doing it. So that at a very macro level, I think is important. But then at the micro level, as you said, Nigel, create a safe space for people to experiment along the way. Allow that
Yes.
experimentation. Give
Yes.
them some guardrails, some bumpers
Yes.
along the way. So Nigel, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your wisdom with our listeners and our viewers. Really appreciate having you on today.
It's been a pleasure, Nolan. I think we're actually grappling with some really important issues. So thank you for provoking me, and I really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. All right. We'll see you soon, Nigel. Thank you.